Welcome to the Revenue Builders Podcast, a weekly show featuring B2B sales leaders and executives. Hosted by five-time CRO John McMahon and Force Management co-founder John Kaplan, the show goes behind the scenes with the people who have been there, done that, and seen the results. If you enjoy our content, please subscribe, rate, and review the show to help us reach more people. Revenue Builders is brought to you by Force Management. We help companies improve sales performance, executing the growth strategy at the point of sale. Find us at forcemanagement.com. Enjoy today's episode.
So Marcello, you had a long road before you got into enterprise sales. Can you talk about first what maybe attracted you to enterprise sales, and then how did you also grow your scales to eventually succeed very well in this space?
Yeah, thanks, John. I didn't have the traditional route into enterprise selling. I was, son of an Italian immigrant, born in Toronto, Canada, paid my own way through what I call a shitty technical college in Toronto. I actually have a computer engineering technology degree.
Let's ask the important question. Did you play hockey?
I did. And that's why you've seen me golf. It's not great, but I golf from the wrong side of the golf ball, right?
When did you start skating?
I'm a lefty. I started skating when I was probably 5 and 6 years old.
That's too late.
Well, listen, my mother said, we're going to be here in Canada. We're going to be Canadian.
Right.
And watch the Maple Leafs on Wednesday night and Saturday night with Don Cherry on TV. And you're going to learn how to skate.
When I've been up to Montreal and Toronto for like hockey tournaments and, there's a break and you go into the other rinks, you'll see kids, I think they're like 2 and they're skating already.
Yeah. Well, that's why I'm selling software for a living and not. Well,
that's why we're doing a podcast.
But it's all about a birthday. When's your birthday, Marcello?
June.
Okay.
Late June.
70 to 80% of the professional hockey players have a birthday January, February, March.
Yeah.
That's just a little tip for you there.
I guess I just missed it, John.
That's from that book, The Tipping Point, right?
No.
Malcolm Gladwell.
No, but it was called Outliers, wasn't
Outliers.
it?
That's it.
Outliers. Yeah.
All right. Sorry for the
maybe
go ahead.
You reminded me of a funny story, John.
Okay.
Go for it. Really quick. When I first found PTC and I was interviewing at PTC as a rep, I was in my 20s, late 20s. Scott Weber says, listen, your final interview is with this guy named Mark Craney. And he's going to take you through this interview process. And at the end, he's going to hit you with a zinger. So you got to be prepared for the zinger.
Yeah.
And his zinger was, hey, Gallo, you think you can take me?
Oh, my God.
Can he come up with any original question? Using the same one for 30 years.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking I got to qualify. Right?
Granny's probably hearing that. He's probably still using the same line.
Mark, you changed my life, brother. So good. And so he says, I qualify. I'm like, well, what take you? Take me where? It's in a fight. In a fight. Do you think you can take me in a fight? And at the beginning of the interview, I talked about growing up in Canada and skating and playing hockey. And I said, Crandy, you play hockey? He's like, no. I'm like, well, let's lace him up, get on the ice. And yeah, I can take you.
Yeah, right.
Got up and left. And I said, where are you going? I'm like, do I have the job? He goes, yeah, you have the job. Get out of here.
Yeah, right.
That was it. That was a real start of my journey. But like I said, I didn't have a traditional path to enterprise software sales. And I think that's a lesson for a lot of people listening to this. You could have a plan, but you have to be willing to change. You have to be willing to adapt. And when I started my career in IT, I knew that wasn't for me. I joined a really small startup in Toronto as a pre-sales engineer. I was the demo guy.
Okay.
And I remember going on the road and doing all the whiteboards and, like a lot of SEs do sometimes, or I'm smarter than John McMahon. Like, why is he making all the money and driving the BMW? And I said, I want a chance to get into sales. And Derek Smith, who was my boss at Ironside Technology, said, I'll give you a shot, but you got to move. I'm like, done. Where do you need me? And he first said California. I said, no problem. The next morning, he says, I need you in Boston. I'm like, no problem. When can you leave? I'm like, Friday. Literally the next week, I packed up my car. I had MapQuest maps on my seat, and I was driving from Toronto to Boston.
Yeah, because all you left in the refrigerator was an old jar of mustard, a container of ketchup, and an old jar of mayonnaise too. That's about all you had in there. Maybe leftover 6-pack. So you gave the leftover 6-pack to your roommate, and you backed up your stereo, and you gave him the
just you, Marcello, or did you have a family?
No, it was just me. I was 20-something years old.
Yeah. So what else did he have? That's all he had?
Nothing. I had a car and a MapQuest sheet, and I remember driving over the Hudson River, and it was kind of hitting me. It's like, where am I going? I don't even know where I'm going. I don't have a hotel. I don't have an apartment. Just showed up, and I stayed at the Sheridan over the Mass Pike in Newton.
Oh yeah.
Stayed there for about 4 days, found an apartment in a weekend, and I was done. That was it. I just moved.
Wow. Good for you. And then what were you doing then? What were you selling?
Back then, it was very riveting. It was like Java-based technology that would be the intermediary between an ERP system and wholesalers. So they can use the web to enter their inventory requests. And that was...
How long did you do that for?
I did that for about 3 years. And then when I knew that company wasn't going to go anywhere fast, Howard Heppelman and Scott Weber came calling to ask me to...
But let's talk about, what did you learn? Did you learn anything in that first company selling?
Honestly, like I still had the mindset of a pre-sales engineer, where when you're a pre-sales engineer, everybody wants to talk to you. But when you're calling on behalf of being a sales rep, I had to learn really quickly. I had to change my vernacular. I had to change my approach because, surprise, surprise, no one's calling you back.
Right.
And back then, there was no I didn't have any structure. I just would pick up the phone and start calling people and hope somebody will call back. But I didn't really learn how to sell. And I was lucky to find PTC, because that's the first time I walk into that company and my mindset shifted. And from that point forward, I said, I will never go to another company where I can't be taught on how to do things properly. Surround myself with people that have experience that could teach me how to do something.
Why did your mindset shift? What are you referring to there?
Well, as soon as Scott Weber started taking me through like the preliminary onboarding process of going through the sales processes, the value-based selling approach, the idea of a value pyramid, it's like these were all foreign things to me. I'd never heard of any of those concepts.
Right.
I think they hired me because maybe I showed them I had some strength and desire to succeed. And I learned all of that. And I tell the story today. I've been with John McMahon for 25 years. I didn't know you there at PTC, but I learned this system. Of course, it's been modernized over the years, but the same tenets are still very applicable. You need a value framework. We used to sell based on ROI, and that ROI is now matured to business outcomes, right? And if we don't have those meaningful conversations with our prospects, we're just another vendor trying to sell another tool.
Oh, so what are the couple biggest learnings that you learned at PTC? You threw out some terminology of some things, but I don't know if those are some of your biggest learnings.
Yeah, as a sales rep, I think first and foremost, you need structure and helping you to stay within the guardrails to eliminate and avoid making the same mistakes over and over again.
And what do you mean by structure?
Like a sales process with stage and gates. And then leveraging some of the tooling that the company can provide. And it's not just a slide deck with a bunch of features, right? It's more an understanding of the market and what common problem traits are evident with current state, and the ability to navigate through just natural language and questioning. I always say to my reps today, discovery is the most important part of our sales process, but it can't be a Spanish Inquisition.
Right.
And I'm laughing because I had a rep at my previous company. He took that to heart, and I was listening to one of his gong calls. And he says, John, I have some questions for you. I don't mean it to sound like a Spanish Inquisition, though. So I wrote that in the gong. You're not supposed to say that part out loud.
Yeah.
So
Exactly.
I'm glad he's coachable, but you have to learn that part out loud. But you have to put yourself in the shoes of the customer and understand, we always talk about dragging through the glass and pain cave and all that stuff. But I think it's more than that. It's actually understanding their current state and the need to future state from a gain or pain perspective, right? Like,
Yeah.
it could be driving to a new market. It could be first mover advantage. Yes, probably something's not going well, and you have to understand that. But also you have to understand the benefit on the other side of it. Again, pain or gain is what I like to teach.
Now, when you said structure, I want to go back to that, Marcello. A lot of people will say, oh, structure, sales process, qualification methodology. You know what that is? That's micromanagement. Yeah. What do you say?
I tell them it's a pathway to a W-2.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a pathway to success, and it's a pathway to sitting in my seat. You want to be a CRO one day? This is the syllabus. This is how you get there. It's not about micromanaging. It's your business. You're the CEO of your territory.
Yeah.
And the best way to do that is to have guardrails. And the guardrails, again, it's not about me micromanaging. I don't care about the perfect sales process. I don't care about the perfect stage gate to get to the next stage. But I do want to make sure that you're making best use of your most cherished asset, and that's your time. Because if you don't follow this system and this process, the worst thing, I read this, that it takes as long or longer to lose a deal than it does to win a deal. Mm. So think about that. So if you take shortcuts up front because you don't want to be micromanaged, and you do all this work, proof of concept and all this stuff all the way to the end, and the EB says, wait a minute, Sigma's a BI and analytics platform. I use Tableau. I don't need to buy that. And you've missed the mark.
Yeah.
So you have to identify all these things up front so that you can earn the right to close the deal.
Yeah. I think of it as like a playbook. So if people love sports, okay, do you think that there's a soccer team, a football team, a hockey team that doesn't have a playbook of exactly where you're supposed to be and what you're supposed to execute on any given play? And that's what a sales process is. Basically is a playbook for these different stages and these different steps in these stages. Here's the play you got to pull off. Here's what you need to know. And here's the skill set you need to have in order to execute it. It's no different than a sports team having a playbook.
That's right. And you have to make them come to their own conclusion. Sometimes I give them a little bit of latitude. Okay, you don't want to do it this way? Let's try it your way. Let's see how that. I had a manager who said,
how does that work out typically?
Well, here's the story. I had a manager who said he was new to the PG Tuesday motion that we've installed. And he says, we can't do PG every Tuesday. It's too much. Like, okay. What do you suggest we do? Well, we're going to maybe do it once a month so we don't overwhelm our prospects. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
The next QBR, he had a tough quarter.
He didn't make his number. Make his number, I'm assuming.
And then we're looking at the leading indicators, and I'll use his name, Chris. I said, Chris, what do you think happened? Like, well, we don't have enough pipeline. Like, okay.
Hey.
So what are you going to do now? Because I think we're going to do PG Tuesday. I'm like, every Tuesday? He's like, every Tuesday. And then I use that as currency for the next 2 years straight in every single QBR to remind everybody else that there is indeed a Tuesday on the calendar every week.
Yeah.
So,
you said in the beginning, Marcello, you said that when you picked up the phone, I want to just go back to this. When you picked up the phone as an SE mm-hmm. or systems engineer or technical resource, you had a different feeling. You had a different response than when you picked up the phone as a seller. Can you dig into that a little bit? Because I think there's a lot to unpack there. What's the difference?
The simple difference, Cap, is when you're an SE, you're answering very specific technical questions that people have to make them look better. And so they welcome that conversation because you're imparting with some knowledge to that person. And it's a very quick and easy, satisfying give. So they want that instant satisfaction, gratification. I have a question, you answered the question. I can now go to my management team and say, I know what I'm doing in this domain. When you're a seller and you're vending, which is what I did early in my career, then kind of the gates kind of go up, the guard goes up, And all they think about is you trying to sell them something that you don't need. So you have to change your language. You have to try to align with what are the questions that they want answered, and not in a technical context, but in a business context. And if you can do that with, John McMahon used to say, you were born with 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. If you can do that by asking very specific lines of questions and learn more about them, their desire, their current state, their future need, and echo that back in a way that solves their problem, answers their question, but in a business-centric way, then you can change that perception. And I say it all the time, we're not selling anything. We're not selling a product. We're selling some area of value that's deemed important to that company. It's our job to figure out what that is, and then just really honestly make sure that what we sell, our services, our products, align to what they're trying to solve to.
So I like this point. I just want to make sure our listeners are getting this correctly. You're not suggesting that a seller doesn't bother with being technical. You are suggesting that whoever you show up with, whoever you show up to, you have to sound like them.
Yeah.
There's an old saying that says you get delegated to those that you sound like.
Right.
And so part of the challenge for sellers is they say, okay, I got technical people who are going to talk about technical requirements, and then I'm responsible for the business outcomes. So I'm going to ask technical resources about business outcomes, and I'm going to get great answers. And that's very rarely the case. So what advice do you have if somebody says you get delegated to those that you sound like? What advice can you give to sellers when talking to technical resources and technical decision makers?
Yeah.
Do you have some advice there?
To me, it's a simple bridging exercise. You have to bridge from the CEO to the EB to your champions to the people that are actually involved in making decisions, to the technical folks, to the end users. You can't be that person across that whole stack. You won't have any credibility. So you need the right person with the right persona on the other end at the right time. And so you're bringing up a good point, Cap. I made that mistake early in my career too, because I had technical chops and I thought I could be everything.
Yeah.
And so when you try to be the executive and the technical person in the room, it's a mismatch. And so you have to bring in the right people at the right time.
I like that. I think as a seller, you are responsible for what I call the ultimate summation. And the ultimate summation is what I heard you say, Mr. and Mrs. Customer. These are the positive business outcomes that you're trying to achieve. So we've got to be able to play back to them business outcomes. And these are the technical requirements
Get you there.
that are required,
Yeah.
that you've told us about. And here's how you said you're going to measure success. So ultimately, the seller is responsible for getting the value proposition, because you can't pivot and talk about how you do it differently or better, where you've done it before, until you have those three, what I call kind of like buckets of sand. You're filling up kind of buckets of sand. But it doesn't mean to the seller that you are the one responsible for creating the technical criteria. If you can, fantastic, but it means it has to be there. That's what I always tell sellers. Like, you have resources, you have to get the team in a position to be able to recap business outcomes, required capabilities, and metrics, measurements for success, before you can pivot to how you're going to do it. So I just want people to hear that. Like, some jobs you have to be more technical. You don't have the technical resources. Other jobs you have resources, but you don't want to bring in technical people. You want to try to own everything. At the end of the day, I just tell people, whether it's you, your company has to be in a position to fill those three buckets. And that's, do you guys, is there anything I'm missing there?
Well,
the only thing is this, as a side note, this is not an English class, but it is a learning environment. And relegate is the actual right term, where you push somebody down to a lower level. Delegate is where I give you a chore. I say, Johnny, you got to go mow the lawn today. That's delegating. So it's relegate.
Relegate.
Still, Kaplan's point is 100% valid.
So I would add one thing, Cap. I don't want my salespeople to be the SEs as well, but I do want them to have intimate knowledge of current environment and some technical chops. And the reason, if you have curiosity about their environment and curiosity about the products we serve, you can hear things in discovery that you otherwise, if you don't have that context. So to do proper discovery, to uncover some aha moments and ask, different kinds of questions and different streams of questions, you have to know about the environment that you're selling into. Right?
It's such a good point, because it was the difference between Joey Bag of Donuts that brought the donuts and said, here's Susan, and she's going to do the demo, and I brought the donuts. That's one end of a ridiculous extreme, to the other end of the ridiculous extreme, where one person is going to go in and they're going to, talk to the technical people, get all the technical requirements, understand how, things are going to be put together, map it to a solution. And I've always felt like no matter where you are, if you are the technical person, you should be intellectually curious about what that seller is trying to uncover and connect to business outcomes. If you are the seller, you should be intellectually curious. I never wanted to be held hostage to. Whenever I heard something in a meeting and I was so thankful that there was somebody else there to answer the question, it was always a red flag for me. Not that I wanted to be the person to answer the question, but I knew that I'd have to be beholden on having those resources with me all the time in order to be able to be effective. And so I was always intellectually curious. I'd get back in the car or get off a Zoom call and say, hey, when they asked that question and when you answered that way, what did that mean? Why did they ask the question that way? Why did you answer it that way? So I think no matter where you are from a bent, I call it a bent, whether you're more technically oriented or more sales oriented, you still have to have that intellectual curiosity, because that's what the most elite sellers. And that's why I was so impressed when I met people at PTC, because most of those people at PTC, there were a lot of engineers at PTC. There were a lot of sellers that were way more technical and smart, very, very smart. And they did an incredible job of bringing those two worlds together. And they weren't Joey Bag of Donuts. Does that make sense?
Yeah, they were involved.
Yes.
Yeah.
But in Marcello's point, what I hope is not lost is, to his point, if you don't know and not intimate about the customer's environment, then what I found from a selling perspective is it's very difficult to be in the customer conversation, because I'm thinking about, what does he mean by that? What's going on here? What's happening? I'm thinking about what I might say or what I might ask. So I'm there physically and I'm having a conversation, but I'm not really in the customer conversation to listen so specifically, like Marcello's pointing out, that I can hear things that I wouldn't hear if I wasn't so intimate with the environment. Does that make sense?
Yeah, knowledge is courage, right? When you're knowledgeable about the space, about the customer, because you've done some research about what value you can add, you can apply your thoughts. Otherwise,
I love that, Marcello. Knowledge is courage. I love that.
Courage.
You know what I like too about this conversation, and I know it's a pet peeve, Johnny, you and I have talked about it. Nobody debriefs anymore. You got back-to-back Zoom calls, or you get in, you're in the cars and you're going places, and nobody talks about what happened in a call.
Well, when they get in the car, what used to piss me off is they get in the car with, let's say, a sales rep and an SE, and they go right on their phones. I'm like, wait a minute, this sales call was very important, and we're not going to debrief about what did you hear in there, what went right, what went wrong, what are the next steps, who's the enemy, who's the champion, what do we, all of those types of questions. No, we're just going to get it on our phone.
Now, John.
How could something on the phone be more important than what we just did for an hour and a half?
Yeah, it's worse now with this work from home culture.
Yeah.
Like at Sigma, we're not. We're in office, and that's controversial. But if you really want to invest in yourself, if you really want to invest in your career, why wouldn't you be next to the person who's going to become your mentor and your coach?
Especially if you're young. You gotta learn. It's all about learning.
We have an office in San Francisco, in New York. We're opening a third office in Austin. We have a big footprint in London. We just opened a new office this week, and we're an in-office culture, and we love it. We love it.
You have a work from work program. Hey, Marcello. So we only got through one thing that you learned at PTC, which is good. This is good conversation. Structure. What would be another big learning that you can remember?
I'm gonna answer your question in a different way.
Okay.
Because, of course, I had ambition. I went from a sales rep to a majors rep, and I remember when they told me you don't need 10 accounts, you have one. And I said, of course, I'm gonna starve. Like, what's my quota reduction, right? And turns out I was the number one rep that year.
But that always happens in these companies, right? Even, the company you're running now, someday somebody may only have one, maybe two accounts, and you close them down from 10. And no one in, let's say, 7 or 8 years could ever get into that account. They drove by it every day. Right. And the excuse that they'll have is, well, 3 reps before me tried to get in there and they couldn't get in there. But you know what it is? Nobody had to dedicate themselves to get in there, and that was the difference. And I've seen the same movie, Marcello, where some people thought, I'm not going to be able to survive. And in that one account, they're the number one rep.
I had that. Nobody could crack the code within the UTC conglomerate.
Yeah.
And I closed the deal at Gary Air Conditioning. I mean, I drove to Syracuse, New York. I lived in that Wyndham across the street at Carrier Circle more than I lived in Boston. And I drove back and forth to Farmington, Connecticut from Boston to be with the EBs. And because I was so focused on that account, when you burn the boats, you don't have any other option but to succeed with what you have.
Exactly.
But you have to have that mindset. So I learned a little bit about that, but I wanted to, when I went from a rep to a majors rep, I wanted to be a first line leader. But
before you get there, I want to, because talk about the difference, because a lot of people think that they can move from a territory rep to a major account rep. Talk a little bit about some of the difficulties that you face when you do go from a territory rep to a major account rep. What are some of the learnings there? Because that's really important.
The biggest learning is the impact of politics within a large organization.
Yeah.
And you don't have one buyer anymore. You don't have one champion anymore. And enemies hide in big companies, and you have to flush it out. So you need a much more sophisticated approach in how you go to market with that one customer. You have to get not just high, but you have to get really wide across the stakeholders. And the selling motion becomes very complex just from a people and political perspective. But more than that, they also buy differently. Like, we talked about value framework and business outcomes, and that's true even with small companies. But when you talk to larger companies, the big banks or the big industrial complexes, nothing will ever get approved without a bulletproof business case. And so you have to sell in a different way. And you got to be really tight on the way you interact with people, the way you articulate value to those folks. And then if you're in the right, it's a very different negotiation playbook as well. Because even your strongest champion at a big company will have to say, this is where I have to let you off on the side of the road. Now you're on your own. The last mile, you have to go with procurement. I'm not allowed to talk to you anymore, John.
Yes.
And so
separation of church and state is what I call it, where they put a gag order on the business and the procurement people are going to do their job.
Now there's techniques to overcome that, but you have to respect the process. But what I usually would say to my EB, where I have an alignment or my strong champion, I'd say something like, Cap, I'm going to respect your procurement process. But at some point, they're going to ask me for something I simply cannot do. At that point, can I come back to you, Cap, and can we work on that together? And that works.
You were very professional. What I used to say was, you can't get alligator arms. I used to tell champions, you can't get alligator arms during this process. They'll say, we're going to drop you off and go to procurement now. And I'd say, just like you said, Marcello, I love it. It's like they're going to ask me for something that's going to undo the value, potentially undo the value of what you and I have agreed to here. And I used to just call it participate in your own rescue. Is that if this is what you want delivered, then you're also going to have to go to procurement. You're also going to have to go to your levels of management and fight for it, because it's going to come to that, especially today. It's going to come to that. You're never going to just work out a deal at procurement and hope a miracle happens and it's going to be the deal that's acceptable to the champion. Like, they're going to have to participate in their own rescue as well.
The thing is, these companies have done a really good job of separating church and state. I mean, a very good job. So
no doubt, but it's like,
they really get a big gag order these days.
Johnny, it's like what we were talking about the other day, and I'm a stickler on this. The higher the value,
yeah,
the more impactful that solution is.
Yep.
The less likely you are to get derailed in procurement. We were talking about the other day about $1 million a day on a barge. Like, that was an extreme example. Is that if you're working on something so critical, I'm not telling that procurement's going to be a blow off, but I'm also telling you, I'm not going to be a slave at procurement. Like, there's going to be some things I'm going to have to say no to, and I'm going to have the confidence and conviction to do that because I can't deliver the value of what they're expecting. And I do understand that, there is separation of church and state. I just want to give people confidence and conviction. The more you connect yourself to that value, the less likely you are to be dominated in one piece of the process.
And I'll say it in a slightly different way. Yes, you're going to get separation of church and state, but for the individual contributors out there listening to this, you have to hold yourself to extreme accountability for that deal. And I never want to hear an excuse from one of my sellers that procurement is dragging their heels and the deal might slip. That's on you. So you still have to, with extreme ownership, own that deal. And you can't do that if you haven't done the right things through the process. Of course, understanding value, but also understanding what's their next best alternative.
Yes.
If they don't do anything. What if they delay by a month, by 6 months? So what? And if you
when they don't have those answers, Marcello, it means that you're in trouble. You're in trouble. And I like to think
it takes you longer to lose a deal than it does to win a deal.
Yes. Right? Yes.
And this is where it comes down to really understanding what the negative consequences of them not solving that pain is. Because I've used this before, but if I call Marcello, who's my potential customer, and he says, John, I'm really busy. I don't have any time right now. And I don't understand the negative consequences. I got to let him go. But if I understand the negative consequences and I say, Marcello, you told me that every week that goes by, your company's losing $1 million by not solving this problem. Typically, Marcello will say, okay, I got 5 minutes. What do you got? And I lay in the 5 minutes. Next thing I go, no, I have 15 or 20. But without understanding the negative consequences to that company, it's really hard to even drive your champion as to why they have to go to procurement now and get the deal done.
Totally.
Why anything?
So you can have a great cost justification. Yeah. You understood the pain. You build a great cost justification. You understand why they have to buy, but you never understood the negative consequences of why they have to do it now. And now you're lost with a big piece. And it makes it really difficult to get rid of that log jam between the business and procurement.
Great.
The other thing is, one of the most liberating things I ever learned in my life about selling is the true spirit and definition of a champion. Power and influence, actively selling on my behalf, and they have a vested interest in my success. The minute I held myself accountable for that, and the minute I held the champion accountable for that, my life changed, because it was never me against procurement. If I'm really honest with myself, and I've built a champion, and with the proper definition, and I've understood the negative consequences, the confidence I always had is I'm not alone. I'm never alone inside of an account. It's not me versus the account. And I think the most elite sellers I've ever met are the ones who actually hold champions accountable, not by berating them, but basically hold them accountable to what they've already learned. And they get them to participate in their own rescue. And sometimes the most elite sellers I've ever seen is the power of the champion and what they're able to do inside their company after interacting with you is sometimes the greatest stories to be told. You've given them more power inside of their account. You've given them more prestige or more value because of what you connected them to. Sometimes it's just giving them the confidence and conviction, but you're never alone. If a rep's talking to you like it's us versus the company, the buyer,
You're missing something.
you're in trouble.
Yeah.
And I bet you that scares the crap out of everybody listening to this right now, because how many deals are you talking about where it feels like we're at a point where it's us versus them? And something's missing. Somebody's not doing their job, and it's probably the champion.
You need to help your reps out, your leaders out there. You need to help your reps out by really helping them understand through your experience what a good champion is. And if I asked each and every one of you guys, you would know who's your favorite champion, what deal was it, and you'll know it right off the top of your mind. And
Yes.
Ed Carrier was my champion there. I knew he liked woodworking. I knew he had skills with a router. I knew he wanted to get promoted. I knew the value that he was bringing to his company and his family in working with me. That's the best champion I've ever had in my career.
What happened to him after you guys did a deal?
He got promoted. He's a VP.
Great example.
Well, the other thing too is when you have a champion and you want to get tighter with them, Cap, which is kind of your main point, right? Good salespeople can predict the future. So they tell the champion, hey, you're going into this meeting.
Yes.
Here's the questions that that the team is going to ask. Are you prepared to answer these questions? When you go in that meeting, the enemy is going to say these things about our company and about our product. Are you ready to answer those questions? And here's the objections that you're going to hear when you hear a presentation from the competition. Here's what they're going to say about us and about our product. And are you prepared to handle that? Or do you understand how to handle it with your group? And when you can predict the future because you've been doing it so often and you know the competition, you know the steps, you know the objections, you know the questions that people are going to ask, that's when you really lock horns together, not against each other, but together with a champion. Yeah. Then they're like, whoa, because they want to de-risk this purchase, right? They're putting their career on the line and they don't want to risk it. And when you can predict what's going to happen and you educate them ahead of time, you really become a partner with them.
It's a great technique. I use that technique even when we're doing role plays with sales reps. This is how the procurement call is going to go.
Right.
How your champion call is going to go. And they usually come back and say, Gallo, it went exactly like that. I'm like, yeah, I know. I'm 55. I've seen it once or twice. But I also use that technique in recruiting. So, John, if I make you an offer, you're going to take this job? Yes. Okay, great. So walk me through it. Tomorrow you're going to go and you're going to resign to your boss. How do you think that's going to go? And you role play that too.
Yes. That
technique works for a lot of what we do for a living. All right. Prepping your reps, making your reps better, one-on-ones, recruiting, direct customer calls, champion confirmation, champion building, and so on and so on. It's just a brilliant technique.
So I hope people are listening to this. If you're leading a team of people and you are not this intimately involved in helping your people get unstuck, if you are trying to use Medic and MedPick as a compliance tool, this drives me nuts. Like people, you don't have this, you don't have that. And then everybody just tries to make you happy by putting checks in the box. If you're not helping people get unstuck, if you're not living this on a day-to-day basis, you're never going to make it to like where you are, Marcello. You're never going to be a 5-time CRO like John McMahon. It begins with leading people is about helping them get unstuck. And so it's not just talking theoretically about the definition of a champion. It's taking real deals and helping people get unstuck. I just see so many internal meetings where people are like, we're going to have a meeting to talk about how we're going to forecast this and what we're going to talk about this and and they're so far away from what's happening at the street level with people being told, you're not good enough. We don't understand your differentiation. We've never heard of you. Go away. And we're still having internal meetings about what's a great territory look like. I just hope that doesn't get lost. That's one of the reasons why Johnny and I do this Revenue Builders podcast, because we've got people like you on, Marcello, who are giving us examples of, you're giving us live examples of your experience with champions.
Well,
not flying at desk.
You know, I've been fortunate to learn from the best, right? From the Force Managements, the John McMahons of the world. And it's my duty to pay that forward. Like this skill, this trade will never die if you have that mindset. So for all you experienced leaders out there, you owe it to your team to make them better, to put that work in. They're the next generation, right? We need the next generation of CROs.
Let's talk about that, Marcello. So as so you were a rep at PTC, and now you start going up the ranks at PTC and a couple other companies. Can you talk about a little bit about some of the lessons you learned as you climbed the ranks in a company?
Well, before I got the chance to be a first line leader, PTC roped me into this. You have to do a rotation in sales ops and sales enablement.
They did rope you into that, huh?
Like, no way, I'm not doing that. That's where sales reps go to die. I'm not doing that. And thank God I did, because I learned such a great appreciation for the importance of enablement, for the importance of stand up and deliver, for the importance of really training people as they come on board. But I also learned the back office operations, sitting with Bruce Mann, devising quotas and comp plans. That's a skill I had never had. I was just on the other side of it saying, this is a shitty plan. I want a better plan. But when you understand the math that goes into it, I've applied that throughout my career. And then I got promoted at PTC. And
well,
so
why did enablement and the things you pointed out, how did they manifest themselves that you started to say, ooh, that's so much more important than I thought previously?
Yeah, because you take that stuff for granted when you're sitting on the other side of the desk, you being PowerPointed to death, right? You really have to put yourself back into the shoes of the individual contributor and always ask yourself the question, what's in it for them? Am I making them better? And then once you learn that philosophy, when you take it to a first line leader role, and not just from the hiring perspective, but really the cadence on the week over week basis, that Monday one-on-one is such an important meeting. And if the meeting starts with, how was your weekend? And, how about those Patriots? You're just wasting time.
Yeah.
If that meeting is all about enablement and development of what went well last week, what are you working on? Here's where I can help you. Now let's talk about this week where you need my help. And oh, by the way, you're going down a dangerous road because your pipeline's lacking. That's part of it, of course. But if you don't have that full teacher instructor mindset in your one-on-ones, you're not doing your team justice. And I learned that through the enablement time that I spent there. I really did.
This is where it goes back to what Johnny was saying, where you have to be intimate with what's happening at the street level. So even when I was a CRO, I always wanted to go on sales calls with reps, mainly to understand like what's going on here, like what's going on with the competition, with the messaging, with what customers are saying, how's the product doing, all of those things. You can't learn when you're flying a desk or you're not out in the field with the sales reps. You can't learn it. So if you don't know what's going on, to Johnny's other point, you're teaching something to them that they're like, why are we learning this? This doesn't resonate with us because this is not what's happening in the field right now.
And that's a whole other hour podcast, by the way. Like,
yeah.
What we're pitching on there is there's a little bit of product market fit conversation in what you just said. And, when I reflect back on my career, I think that's one of the mistakes I made, actually. I always thought, if you think about the process, you got a PM talking to engineering, that PM talks to PMM, that PMM talks to your enablement lead, and the enablement person trains the sales force with, here's the slide deck, go sell the stuff. And I've always thought, I'm downstream of all this, give me the stuff and I'll sell it. But as a leader, even as a rep, I would challenge you to have that product market fit forever mindset. That's what we do here at Sigma. Every time we go on a forecast call, we talk about what's the use case. And we try to pattern match. It's how we got into our next phase of growth around data applications here at Sigma. And if you don't do that well, the company can't grow and you get stuck with a single product mindset, right? So there's a lot of pieces there too, that I've learned kind of in hindsight that I would challenge your audience to pay more and more attention to product market fit.
Well, it's always, to your point, it's always changing. So I always thought, okay, my customer's getting more educated on this technology. The competition's changing, their product's changing, their marketing is changing, the way they're selling is changing. You know, what am I doing to make sure that my sales reps are changing and adapting to the ever-changing environment in front of them?
Yeah.
It's a great point, Marcello, a great point. And it happens, sometimes it can happen once a year. I found sometimes when we're scaling, I've gone into the CEO's office and said, I think we're a different company today than we were last quarter. It's changed that much.
Oh, and it's going even faster now with AI, right?
Yeah, right. Exactly. Yeah.
I think most of the change that happens to companies today happens in front of them and not inside of their own walls. And what I mean by that is it's like having a vaccine. This is probably controversial. It's like having a medicine that its original intent,
make it a pill.
It's having a pill. Its original intent is to do this. And yet they find out it does these three things and there's a huge market there.
Or it doesn't do anything.
Yeah. Or WD-40 comes from NASA. The point I'm making is that I think people spend so much time inside out. They spend so much time in meetings. They spend so much time talking to each other and convincing themselves that the product's great or the customer's doing this or customer's doing that. My best advice, I can always tell when I walk into companies, my best advice is put a customer up on the board. If you're having a conversation, just give me some real examples. Put a customer on the board. Who did you talk to? What problems do you solve? How specifically do you solve them? How do you solve them differently or better than anybody else? And where have you done it before? The greatest pivots in the last 20 years of force management have come from our customers. One specifically came from a great customer that called me and was worried about the future of force management a few years ago and gave us a heads up on a way to go inside of a market. Another one came from, it kept coming up and we're listening to what the sellers are getting objections on and what's happening in the forecast and what people are telling us on deals and that kind of stuff. If we didn't have our eyes and ears open to how that impacted a customer, we would never know that the market was changing. And I just don't think people, I think people are so, I guess the way I could say it is, you know what I'm saying? If your meetings and if you're inside out, and there's no real customers or real impact or real examples from a customer or market perspective, you're just smoking your own dope. And,
you're stuck in your own constraints is the way.
Yes. It's your best thinking that got you there. And it's going to be your best thinking that's going to keep you there.
You don't have the courage to say, maybe I was wrong and we have to adapt.
And today,
be that person.
Today, it's happening like with AI and with things are happening so fast that you've got to have the ability to get. I guess I'd ask you guys, what advice do you give people to how to make sure you got your finger on the pulse of the market, and how do you get that information back into the company?
Yeah, I do it a couple of different ways. So customer success is under my purview here. Mike runs customer success, and they're very close to our customers. We have a great retention rate because of him and his team. But we also echo back everything that we're hearing.
Right.
That's kind of one line of defense. The other line of defense is during prospecting, our reps and our SEs bring information back. But a really important thing that I like to do as well is I go to our PMs and say, here's the pattern that I'm finding. Can we set up some meetings with these 5 customers? I want you to hear it from your lens.
Right.
And then figure out what that means for us, the market that we serve, maybe the market that we should be going into, what impact that has for our next version of product. Is it a new product? Is it a pivot? We're lucky we're not in a pivot state. We're adding building blocks on top of our platform. But you need everybody. You need PMs, you need customer success, you need SCs, you need your sales reps. And, Mike Palmer's our CEO, and he really beats the drum on innovation, not just AI. I mean, he beats the drum on AI because, of course, everything we do is underpinned with AI here. But he beats the drum on product market fit forever. It was one of the themes that on his keynote presentation at our sales kickoff. It was product market fit forever. And you need that mindset. That's part of a growth mindset.
I love that.
The bottom line is go call on customers and get feedback from customers. I don't know if you remember, there was an old American Airlines commercial.
Yeah.
Where there was a guy standing in the center of
tickets.
And he had like 20 people around him. And he basically said, we had a really bad quarter.
Right.
Which means we don't know our customers. And he had a stack of 20 airline tickets, and he went around and handed an airline ticket to everyone. And he goes, you know what we're going to go do? We're going to go call on our customers.
Imagine that.
It's as simple as that.
He said, hey, what are you going to do? And he pulled it out from his back pocket. We actually used that story at Force Management at a critical time for us. And here's what we went out and asked customers. It was so awesome, the feedback we got, because they're already customers. They need us to be successful. They're going to give us the best feedback. And I asked the question, where are we better than we think we are? Number one, because it was easier to do it that way. Then secondly, where are we not as good as we think we are?
That's the best question.
And it's the best question. And we would get unbelievable feedback because you're open for it. And you don't go to people that have just told you no, because they're going to give you like the House committee. They're going to put the hand over the microphone and check with the lawyer and see what they could say. Oh, you're just so close. Everybody loved you. You're just so close. It was hard to make a decision. We always go to the existing customers and ask them for real great feedback. The feedback you'll get when you ask people, where are we not as good as we think we are, is phenomenal. And if you have to have a mechanism to get that.
You have to. You're missing the boat. And when you do that, like, customers buy from you because you're going to deliver value to them at that point in time. But they also buy from you because it helps minimize risk, because they think you're innovative and forward thinking and you're going to continue to grow, and they can grow with you. And if you don't listen to your customers, you're going to miss the mark. And if you listen to your customers, NDR benefits, gross revenue retention benefits, you keep cranking your new ACV. We're experiencing that today. And it's a beautiful thing.
Yeah. So Marcello, okay, sales ops, enablement, you learned a lot there. Now you're climbing up the ladder.
And
talk to us about a couple more lessons that you learned.
Okay.
This is all good. This is great stuff.
Here's one thing I'll say. Like, I won't get into details because we don't have time here, but I spent 6 years at BMC and I got promoted along the way. I was a third line leader. I remember running the Northeast and in that Grace building every week on 42nd and 6th.
Yeah.
And I had a great career there. And I don't know, by the time I left, I was running a $150 million book of business, something along those lines. And then I get a call from Carlos Telatorre. And he says, you need to come to MongoDB. And so, sure, I'll have a conversation with Carlos. I have a couple conversations with Carlos. Then I meet Dave, arguably one of the best CEOs in tech, in my opinion. Dave, you expect a lot, but you're fair. I'll give you that. Great leader. And somehow Dave and Carlos convinced me to go to MongoDB as an RD, first line leader.
So you took a step back, which a lot of people would never do.
I probably had
a VP
people working for me, John. And when I asked Dave, what do you need me to do? He says, I need you to run New England. I'm like, okay. How many people do I have? He's like, you got 2, but you got to shoot 1. Like, okay, so you want one person.
Which always makes you wonder why they didn't shoot them before you got them.
Oh, Tony Rosti, he's a great guy up there. He worked for me for a period of time. And I'm like, well, how many do I have to hire? Like, I don't know, 4 or 5. Like, okay, that's it. And he convinced me to take that job. And you did too, John. I don't know if you remember this.
Yeah.
The last conversation I had with you, you said, well, Gallo, if you don't get promoted in the next 12 months, it's nothing I did wrong.
That was pretty good.
My job was pretty good. Everything right there.
And you got promoted.
And the first year, I moved my family to California. So if you can't
run the West, right?
Yeah. If you can't bet on yourself, who can you bet on? That's one of the biggest lessons I've learned. So I left Toronto. I moved to Boston. I met my wife. My kids were born there. I had a great career in Boston. At the time, my boys were 11. We have twin boys, and we uprooted them out of Boston and moved to California. And I thought moving to Boston was the best thing I did. And then moving to San Francisco was the best thing I did. And you just need to have that mindset of, if you can't bet on yourself, who can you bet on?
Right.
And it served me well. And don't worry about title. Like you say to me too, John, don't be in a hurry to make a mistake.
Well, I also say to people when they're doing these types of things, and especially when you're taking a step back, is don't confuse position with opportunity. So I get calls all the time. People want a little guidance. And then they'll explain, let's say, just 2 companies to make this easy. And one company, they explain the opportunity's not good, but the title's big, vice president or bigger. Then they explain another one where the opportunity is really good if you listen. And they're explaining it to me. So they're explaining how good the opportunity is, but the title is 1 or 2 steps down. And I tell them, take the opportunity, because a couple of years from now, you'll be in a month. If you're really working, you'll be, one, surrounded by better people. You'll be scaling quicker, having fun, making more money, gaining stock, and you'll gain that title that is offered from the bad opportunity. And what do 9 out of 10 people do? They let their ego get in the way and they take the position. They call me back 2 years later and say, you were right. And I'm like, that's not why you called me. You called me, it's not why I give out advice. I'm hoping to, help you out on your opportunity. So that should be a lesson, like what Marcello did. That should be a lesson to a lot of people. Pick the right opportunity.
Yeah. And Cedric Pesch, arguably a great operator as a CRO. I learned a lot from him over the years.
Phenomenal. Cedric's phenomenal.
And he would say, don't be in a hurry. Like you have to gain the experience to have the seat. Controversially, I left MongoDB maybe a year or 2 early, but I would never regret it. Had great experiences in, getting my chops as a CRO at MoveWorks. I hope this taping ages well, because MoveWorks was acquired on Monday by ServiceNow. Let's hope it closes.
Oh, there you go. Congrats.
But what I'll say further to your point, John, is don't go chase opportunity and title. Follow people that can teach you something new, people that have a philosophy and a point of view. I would never have met Mike Spicer if it wasn't for you and Chad Peets through my journey. I would have never been at Sigma Computing if I hadn't met Mike. And I would have never been able to be a CRO if I didn't take the chance to leave MongoDB to go to MoveWorks.
Mm-hmm.
All those things to me are intertwined.
Yes.
You have to, and I try to impart this on my kids, you have to take calculated risks.
Mm-hmm.
You want to grow, but don't do it from a position of ego. Because
right.
You get caught. It
Yeah.
doesn't work out the way you hope.
So let's talk about some of those lessons from RD all the way up to VP and then up to CRO. Give me 1 or 2 more lessons we can discuss here.
Yeah, the span.
You've already brought up a whole bunch of valuable ones.
The span of control changes, right? And when you go from a rep to an RD, you want to be a super rep. When you go from an RD to second line, you want to be a first line. When you go from second to third line, you're not sure what the job is anymore. So you have to grow as you grow in those careers. Like, I'll give you an example. We're going through this right now at the beginning of the fiscal year. To me, and onboarding is a whole different topic, but onboarding to me starts with territory management. Because you need to hire the people commensurate to the territory that you have open. You have to cut those territories and onboard people so that day one, they have their territories, they know what they look like, and then enable and all that great stuff happens, and you compress the ramp time.
Everybody's listening should, dial that back 20 seconds and make sure that you fit your profile,
no
fit
doubt.
the position you're hiring for. You can't have one profile for major accounts, territories, channels, all that stuff. Go ahead. Sorry, Marcello.
And what about the point? And what about the point of having the freaking, you're going to bring somebody into your environment and you're not going to have a territory ready. You're not going to have it set up. Like, why would anybody take that job? Like, I always have questions like that.
I first walked in the door here. It's, we get them to boot camp, and we did our first boot camp, in-person boot camp, like shortly after I joined. And some of the reps didn't have their territory, so they couldn't do the pre-work. Like, well, what do you mean? So we changed that pretty quickly. It's crazy to me. Like, how do you know if you hired the right person? You may hire a commercial rep to go run JPMC. Like, that doesn't work.
Right.
Totally.
So, but as you get promoted up the stack, to me, things like territory management have to be the responsibility of the second line leader, because you can't put it on the first line leader because they're too emotional about it. I'm trying to take care of Cap and I'm trying to take care of Johnny Mac. I can't take accounts away from them. I had a leader in New York that said we can never add another region in New York, John. We don't have enough accounts.
Right.
And that was 7 months ago. I have 4 regions in New York today.
Yeah.
The East Coast today.
But you're saying that's the job of the second line manager, because the first line manager might have been a sales rep with the current team. Then they get promoted to be the manager. So some of those people are like their friends. And then those friends threaten the manager saying, if you take an account away from me, I'm going to quit.
Yes.
And the manager's a first time sales rep, so a sales manager, and they don't know how to handle a situation like that.
Yeah. Well, I handle it in a very simple statement. I will not be held hostage. That's what I say.
Right.
Well, the other thing is, it's
Next
not
time you try to quit, you're gone.
But the other part of this problem is when they start protecting reps that have been there for a while and you're bringing new reps in, you're not equitably dividing the territory so that you're gaining the highest productivity from all the reps. And therefore, some reps come onto those teams where there's been favorites played and big chunks of the territory are already taken. And these new reps come in and they can't make it.
Absolutely.
So it's totally unfair to the people you're hiring. You have to, as a leader, be equitable and divide the territories, 1, to maximize productivity, and 2, to be fair to everyone.
Because there's no other way no other way you're going to grow. And the best advice I could give the first and second line managers always was, I would grab territory. I'd travel with somebody. I'd say, hey, give me their territory plan. I can't tell you how many times, even in force management, when I'd go and travel with people as a consultant, I'd say, hey, let me see the territory plan. There is no territory plan. I mean, what do you mean there's no territory plan? Because what I wanted to do was ask a question about not where they were taking me to their best account. I wanted to ask about the 10 accounts they're not calling on. And so nobody's calling on those accounts. And therefore, that's how regions don't grow, is nobody's ever calling on those accounts. But the minute you ask a rep, the minute you ask them about what's going on in that account, it's so hard for that rep to get emotional and say, I need that account, but they have no information on it. It's the third QBR that they're not. Away. But you know what, guys? Nobody's inspecting. Like, how many people are actually doing that at QBRs? QBRs have turned into, I don't want to be negative, but a lot of things I'm seeing out there, it's just the forecast.
No.
They're just focusing on the forecast and making the number. And what we're talking about is like, that's a nice to talk about, and it's critical. Like, those companies don't grow. When you're not inspecting at that level, they just don't grow.
No. And look, we added 64 sellers this past fiscal year to our company. And John, you were at our board meeting. We're projecting to add 80 more this year. Because we're able to do the territory management stuff really well, and the market is ready for us. We got the best product. We got a huge TAM.
Tell everybody a little bit about what Cigna does.
Yeah. Cigna, at the end of the day, it's a data and analytics platform. And it's more than just BI. BI is one leg of the stool of what we do. And we go after the incumbents. It's a huge market that's ripe for disruption. No one's invested in this market in years. Tableau, Click, ThoughtSpot, blah, 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 right? Strategy. It's not MicroStrategy anymore. It's just strategy with a Bitcoin logo. I don't know if you saw that. So BI is one leg of the stool. We do a very strong embed approach to how we go to market. There's a lot of customers that have partnered with us to use Sigma as their embedded front end to their customers, and a lot of them monetize that. And then the third pillar is around data applications. Now, we sit live on the cloud data warehouse, any cloud data warehouse. We're big with Databricks and Snowflake and BigQuery and Redshift and structured data. And what you'll find is there's a whole line of SaaS companies and SaaS tools that have been invented over the years because the systems of record they serve are fundamentally flawed. And really what they are a UI layer with some workflow to solve that specific niche problem, but it's all driven by data. So now we can help our customers consolidate a bunch of sprawl on those individual siloed SaaS applications through a data platform mindset. And we're doing it today. I mean, hundreds of customers have already adopted what we're doing with data apps, and everything is underpinned with AI. It has to be today. We're very strong in that domain, but we're lucky enough to call about 1,400 companies our customers. They're very valuable assets, and hopefully we treat them well. They'll say the same thing, and we're growing 80-85% clip.
So, dude, how does somebody get on the Sigma train? Like, there's got to be sellers that are listening to this. Like, Marcello's an awesome leader. It sounds like an awesome marketplace, a great product fit. How does somebody get a hold of you for an opportunity?
Yeah, I mean, look, there's not many companies that are growing at our clip and actually accelerating growth as we get to meaningful numbers, right? I'm going to answer your question in a different way. I'll start with the negative. Don't come here if you can't PG. Don't come here if you can't work hard. Don't come here if you don't want to be surrounded by experts in this domain and learn from your peers. Come here if you have ambition. Come here if you want to be part of disrupting a massive TAM. Come here if you want to accelerate over the next 2 years, not just your career, but this company into IPO. And come here to someday take this seat. I want you to earn this seat. Cedric used to say this all the time. We have an SDR to CRO program. If that's what you want to become, we will teach you how to become a CRO. You will get the best education you can possibly get with this program and this system at this company, with this leadership team, with everything I've learned over the years. That's why you would want to come here.
Well done.
So we need 80 brave.
80 brave.
Well, number of leaders to go with it.
That's right. Well, yeah, when you hire that much, I mean, that's the thing that I tell folks that are sitting right outside this window. There's plenty of opportunity for promotion. I'll steal Johnny Mac's line. If you're not getting promoted, it's nothing I did wrong, right? The opportunity is going to be there.
Yeah, exactly. It's a huge opportunity.
It's earned.
Yeah.
Earned. And that's a privilege. I feel privileged to be in this seat. I feel privileged to have learned what I've learned over the years with great mentors. And I'm gonna pay that forward and try to make the next generation of great CROs.
You wear it well.
With that, Marcello Gallo, CRO Sigma. Thank you, sir. Thanks for all your input. We probably have to have you back because we only hit really on 5 or 6 key learnings, and I know you have a lot more scars on your back. Mr. Kaplan, thank you.
Scars are experience, right? So
scars of experience.
Sitting here with you guys, I appreciate it.
And thanks to everyone for listening to another episode of the Revenue Builders Podcast.
Thanks for listening to today's episode. Be sure to check us out at forcemanagement.com.